Ever since noodles were introduced to Japan by Chinese immigrants in the 1800s, ramen has been a staple of Japanese culture, eventually coming to America during the 20th century and evolving into the American pop culture staple that we know today. To improve on our old food review of Kukai Ramen, we will be comparing it to another top-rated ramen restaurant in Oregon called Afuri and seeing how well they match up against each other.
The first ramen restaurant that we reviewed was Kukai Ramen and Izakaya. Starting in Japan as a local ramen shop, it wished to bring authentic Japanese ramen to the US and opened its first location in Seattle. Due to its extreme popularity, it soon expanded to other locations in Oregon, Illinois, and Indiana. The restaurant itself was designed extremely well, with stylish and modern furniture, an open kitchen, and decorated by many Japanese art pieces and designs. The service at this restaurant was exceptional, with extremely friendly waiters who were able to answer any questions we had about the menu. They were also able to provide extremely fast service, with our first dishes coming around 5 minutes after we placed our order.
First off, we have the appetizers. The first appetizer we tried was the shrimp cutlet. The shrimp cutlet was composed of shrimp paste deep fried in tempura butter and served with tare sauce, a Japanese soy based sauce. The dish was extremely tasty, providing both sweet and savory elements. The crunchy exterior paired nicely with the sweet tare sauce, which fits nicely with the flavorful shrimp underneath, forming one very complete appetizer. And at a price of $5, it is a pretty reasonable price for a restaurant appetizer. Next up is the pork gyoza. The pork gyoza was essentially a Chinese style pot sticker with a Japanese twist. The gyoza dumplings were fried with a pan sear on the bottom side of the dumpling, forming the traditional look of a pot sticker. Meanwhile, the interior is filled with pork and chives. At a price of $5 for 5 dumplings, the price is in line with other appetizers. Next, we have the ramen dishes. For my ramen dish, I ordered the miso ramen. The ramen was arranged nicely with the sweet corn, bamboo shoots, and soybean sprouts each occupying their own corner of the dish. The pork belly was tender and rich in flavor, with the tender meat melting in your mouth as you ate it. The broth was the best part of the ramen, with the perfect combination of sweet, salty, and umami. The noodles were more interesting. For ramen noodles, the texture was far chewier than most. The noodles themselves were reasonably flavorful, having soaked in much of the broth. The ramen broth had a salty taste with a slight sweet aftertaste from the sweet corn mixed in. However, I constantly felt the need to pick up my water just to counter the overwhelming saltiness from the broth.
The ramen that I had was the Yuzu Shio ramen. Yuzu Shio is a type of ramen that is traditionally made using a salt base as flavoring, and the one at this restaurant was very good overall. It is neatly garnished with bamboo shoots, chashu pork, and egg, and assorted greens, and its noodles have ample flavor and very good texture. The noodles have absorbed the rich flavors of the broth and combine very well with the toppings to make a very balanced dish. However, the one downside of this dish was the saltiness of the broth. Even though the broth was made using a salt base, it was so overwhelmingly salty that I had a difficult time finishing it. This may have been to give the noodles more flavor, but the trade-off was not worth it. However, the deliciousness of the ramen and its topping still made it a very solid dish overall. The cost of each ramen was $13 a bowl, and for the amount of food that you are getting and the decent taste that it has, this is a pretty good deal. Is 4 stars, and we think this is a decently reasonable review. However, despite having really good service and a phenomenal atmosphere, we think that the food is not quite up to par to give it 4 stars, and therefore we will give Kukai a rating of 3.5 stars overall. Now we will be moving on to our next restaurant, Afiri. Just like Kukai, Afiri is another restaurant that got its start in Japan and is starting to expand into the US. In fact, Afiri specifically chose to open its new location in Portland because the city offers something that no other US city could: soft water from a pure source in Mount Hood. This, combined with the locally sourced produce and meat from the Pacific Northwest farms, made it an ideal place for a ramen restaurant. The location was also extremely unique. The restaurant was built out of an old warehouse complete with giant sliding doors, and the old ceiling and basic construction can still be seen even after its conversion.
The service and overall atmosphere at Afuri was excellent. When you first walk in, there's always an extremely kind and welcoming server there to greet you and lead you to a table. The area is dimly lit and extremely relaxing, with light EDM music playing in the background and an open kitchen, welcoming all for a good meal and a great time with friends. But the main attraction of Afuri has to be its bar. The structure is hard to miss, with the bright lights illuminating the shelves of different types of liquors. Even though we were obviously not allowed to partake, it was clearly the main point of focus. The first appetizer we ordered was the classic miso soup. Miso soup is a classic Japanese dish made mainly of sardines and seaweed ground down into a smooth paste and assorted vegetable toppings, and the one served at a furi is stellar. Its traditional base was accompanied with tofu, sea beans, and mushrooms, providing an additional element of texture and earthy flavor to the already delicious dish. The only downside to this dish is the price, costing $5 for a relatively tiny bowl.
Our second appetizer was the sake sushi roll. Sushi is about as recognizable of a Japanese dish as you can get, and the Fury's sake sushi roll doesn't disappoint. Made with a mix of snow crab, salmon, avocado, and a hint of lemon zest, it checks all the boxes for an amazing sushi roll. It successfully combines the classic savoriness of commonplace sushi ingredients with a note of citrus at the very end that complements the dish perfectly. Even at a price of $14, which is relatively expensive for a 6-piece sushi roll, it is well worth its price, as it is a unique take on a Japanese classic that you can't find anywhere else. At Afiri, I also got the Yuzushio ramen. Compared to the Yuzushio ramen from Kukai, this ramen was a much better take on a very similar dish. While containing almost the exact same ingredients such as chashu pork and bamboo shoots, Afiri was able to make it equally if not more flavorful without the broth becoming overly salty. The marinated and fried pork provided an added sweet element to the dish, while the salt-based broth and the bamboo shoots still provided the classic savory and aromatic notes that every ramen should contain. This gave the dish a very diverse flavor profile and made it a much stronger dish overall than the one served at Kukai. At a slightly more expensive price at $14, it is a much better bargain.
Instead of ordering another miso based ramen, I instead decided to order the hazelnut tantan mian. Unlike the other ramen dishes, the hazelnut tantan mian is unique in that it is vegetarian. Despite this, the dish brings its own twist on a traditional ramen taste, with the hazelnut forming a mutually beneficial partnership with a sesame oil infused broth. This, when combined with the chili oil within the broth, forms a surprisingly pleasant aroma and an even more surprisingly delicious ramen dish.
Afiri Ramen is also currently rated 4 stars on Yelp, but given the excellent overall experience that we had there, we think it deserves a slightly higher rating. It took traditional Japanese classics and elevated them to a next level, and matched this amazing food with an equally good service and a chill and relaxing atmosphere. Because of this, we gave Afiri a 4.5-star rating. It is the full package of a restaurant and can be enjoyed whether you're a food critic or someone just looking for a good time.
Overall, both restaurants had extremely good service, beautiful interiors, and welcoming atmospheres. However, seeing that both of them are similar in price, and that the food from Afuri was consistently better than the food served at Kukai, we would have to give the edge to Afuri as the better restaurant overall.